Sicha tonight will be in Lekutei Sichas Chelek Chof Aleph, Sicha Beis to Parshas Bei. It talks about the union of Eidus by Kiddush HaChedesh. The whole union of Kiddush HaChedesh is, and I'll explain it just in short, that in the Jewish calendar, every month, a month goes according, we have the calendar by the months, and every month is according to the cycle of the moon. And a month sometimes could be 29 days or could be 30 days. And the way it worked originally was that when it came to 30th day, if witnesses came and saw the birth of the new moon, in other words, since the cycle of the moon is 29 and a half days and Tovshin Tzaddik Gimel Chalokim, so you have to know when there's the birth of the new moon. In other words, the moon has a cycle and it gets smaller and smaller. We see it less and less till finally it's completely not seen, and then it starts over again. So if on the 30th day of the month, two witnesses come and say they saw the beginning of the new moon, and they testified in the Bezdin, in front of Bezdin, Sanhedrin, then that day, which was the 30th from the month, really turns into the first day of the next month. That means that this past month had 29 days. If no Eidos come, then the 30th day belongs to the previous month, and then that month has 30 days. When it's not possible to do it through, we call this through Riyah, means to seeing, Eidim seeing it, then there is a calculation, an astronomical calculation when the new moon is born, and that's when the new month starts. The way we have it now, we have a set calculation, which we know ahead of time for every time when the new month is going to be, which month will have 29 days, which have 30 days, etc., etc. But originally it wasn't like that. You had to have Eidos coming to say that they saw. And if they come on the 30th and they say they saw the new moon, then that day becomes the first day, becomes Chodesh. And if the Eidos don't come, then automatically that day is the 30th of the past month, as I said, and the new month starts the next day. But you have to have Eidos. The truth is, even at the time when they had Eidos, when they based it on Eidos HaChedesh, we call it, they also, the Bezdin did the calculations. And the reason they did it, that this would prove to them sometimes that people come and testify, and according to the calculation, it was impossible for that to happen, that this day that they say they saw the new moon is not possible, then they didn't accept those Eidos. But it was only in rare cases when they used the calculations, but usually it was based on the Eidos. That's the din of Kiddush HaChedesh. It's all learned out from one pasuk in this week's Parsha. In the Parsha says, in Mitzrayim, Vayemer Hashem el Moshe v'Aaron be'eretz Mitzrayim Leimer, Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron in Mitzrayim, saying, and what did he say? This month, which means the month of Nisan, should be the beginning of the months, and this should be the first month of all the months. And that's one pasuk about Kiddush HaChedesh, and in that pasuk, that's the source of all the different dinim in Kiddush HaChedesh, the Rambam, all kinds of halacha, but it's all based on this one pasuk. So this is the pasuk which is the source of Kiddush, the mitzvah of being Mekadosh. The Bezdin has to decide when is Rosh Chodesh, and it comes through the Eidos. So the Rebbe says like this: but the so Eidos HaChedesh is the aplukta zwischen Reb Shimon and Rabbanan concerning the witnesses that come to testify that they saw the moon. That's called Eidos HaChedesh. And the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah there's an argument between Reb Shimon and the Rabbanan. Reb Shimon holds as Abu b'nei v'chol hakrevim ksherim l'Eidos HaChedesh. Reb Shimon holds that a father and a son and all other relatives are allowed to testify to HaChedesh. In regular cases, you can't have two Eidos. Usually you need two Eidos to testify different things. You can't have the two Eidos to be relatives to each other, a father and a son, two brothers, etc., etc. But Reb Shimon says when it comes to Kiddush HaChedesh, Eidos HaChedesh, you could accept two relatives. And the reason he says so, what's his opinion? Because the Pasuk says Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron, and one of the words he said to them was HaChedesh Hazel Lochem. This month, which means the singing of making the Chedesh, is to you. What's meant? So he learns, what does that mean? That this Eid is the testimony that it comes for the Chedesh, could be with kosher if it's with you. What's with you? With Moshe and Aaron, Brider, they were brothers. And the Torah said, you guys, like two people like you, would be accepted as Eidos. So here we see that this is a special exception to the rule that the two Eidos that have to testify in the moon could be two brothers, which automatically would also mean a father and a son. It's the same idea that relatives are allowed. The Rabbanan halten as Krevens ein Apostel Eidos HaChedesh. The Rabbanan hold that even by the Eidos HaChedesh, Kreven relatives are not accepted, posel. The posik means the posik says, Achedesh Azel Lochem, which from the word Lochem, the Shimon says means you, that you too would be kosher. Rabbana said the pshat in the posik is something else. The posik means to say, Eidezu Tehei Mesura Lochem, that this Eides should be given over to you. Lochem, meaning, who was Meshva, and there represent a Bezdin. As a Bezdin is Makabel the Eides, Makadeshim Chedesh. A Bezdin has to accept the witnesses and be Makadesh the Chedesh. And that's what Lachem means. But it doesn't mean that you, people like you, which means relatives, are also allowed. Now we have to understand what's the svara of Reb Shimon. Why would he? There's a posik talking, but what's the reason behind it? So the Rebbe Marash Mavayer, the Rebbe Marash in a Maimer explains that time for Reb Shimon, the reason for Reb Shimon as Eides HaChedesh is anders from Kol Eides. The reason why the Eides HaChedesh is different than all other testimonies that we have in the Torah. And he explains it like this. Bald as I feel on the Eides weiß doch best not Yachesh and Vences Eschede, since even without the Eidim, the witnesses, Bezdin would know on their own, according to the calculation, according to the Cheshman, when is Eschede, and where do we see that we rely on? That's enough. Balderich is by uns, like it's now by us. As Achshav Sheim Mekashin Al Piyariya, now that we don't, not Mekadesh the Chedesh, you don't establish the Chedesh. According to the Riyah, according to the site that the Eidim see. So how do we have Rosh Chodesh now? On the same Chibal HaCheshbon. We rely on the Cheshbon. So we could rely on the Cheshbon. And the Bezdin at that time, even when they accepted Al-Pi Eidis, they also made the Cheshbon. They knew the Cheshbon. Kum Tuisa comes out as the Eidis is not azach was below them lo Eidim Klal. So the Eidis HaChedesh is not something that we wouldn't know without them. See, normal cases, what is the job of the Eidis? Something you don't know, you have to verify. So the Eidim are the ones that verify, because without them we don't know. But here, obviously, we know it without them also. The Rebbe said, therefore, even relatives are kosher because they're not the same type of Eidim. When Eidim you need Eidim to verify something you don't know otherwise, so you don't accept to relatives. But if it's not for that reason, then two are kosher. And in the orders 5, the Rebbe says this answers a kasha with the Pnei Yeshua in the Gemara there. The Pnei Yeshua says that according to Reb Shimon, that relatives are allowed kosher by Eides HaChedesh. Why don't we learn out from there that in every time of Eides, brothers craving should be kosher? But according to what the Rebbe Marash says, that's answered. Because this is special. This is the reason they're kosher, because they're different type of Eides. It's Eides that we know what it is that they're testifying about without them. So their union is not so important. But the Rebbe says, darf man verstehen, we have to understand, der Psul von Kravim doch nicht mit Hadachshashem Ishakro. When we say craven relatives are possible to be Eidim, it's not because we're afraid they might be lying. Because they're two relatives, they might be lying. No, Gzeiras Melechi, the Loshen in the Gemara and the Rambam, because that's what Hashem said. So there's a din that Eidim are possible. In other words, if the reason would be because we're Cheshesh, so we say here, if the reason would be because we're afraid maybe they're lying. So here, when we can't be afraid of that, because we'll check it up. We'll check it up with the Cheshbainis. With the calculations. So then we understand why this would be different. But if it's just a gzeira of the Torah, the Eibishter said, the Melech said, the Eibishter said that relatives are possible, is manishtan of them was bezen veisap yacheshim the emeskite from the Eidim. So why is it different that because they know that what the Eidim are saying are true, they know it anyway? But there's a din of Eidim. That's all the din that there has to be to Eidim. So why would this be different than other Eidim? The Shleimer Rabbi in them, the Rebbe says the explanation is like this: Eides is not nur a bitter al piseichel. Eides bechlal, even when two Eides come and testify on something. So normally we learn that most Eides is Eide bitter, which means you don't know if your guy says you owe me $100 and he says I don't. So here come in the Eides. They verify. Without them, we wouldn't know. So it's a logical reason why we rely on the Eidim, but it's not only a bitter al piseichel, a logical bitter. If that we find out, no, it's a din. It's a special din of Eides. Vasias Kmar Dover Gzeres HaKosov. When Eides say something, it's not only we verify through their words what happened. I'm not going to use the right words, but Kilo, they make it happen. If they said so, the Torah accepts Gzeres HaKosov, accept what they're saying. When the Pasuk says Al Pishnayim Eidim, Yokum Dover. Yokum Dover, based on two Eidim, the dover, the thing will be established. The Yokum Dover doesn't only mean will be established, will we find out what it was. Yokum Dover also means Yokum will be established. They make it that it's so. And with the Rambam is the Rambam explains that in Tzavei Nolachtem Zadim Al Pishnei Eidim Ksherim, The Rambam says that we were told to paskin the din to give a verdict according to two edim, if they're kosher edim, even though we're not sure they're not lying. Why, if edim say something, we accept it? Maybe they're lying, just like people lie. Maybe the two edim lie. Okay, we do investigation, we question them, everything, and we come to a decision that we can rely, but it's still possible that they're lying. So the Rambam said, but the Torah made a din. So the fact that there's a din that you have to have two edim. So just like there is a din that you have to have as a din, not just as a seicheldike reason, dieselbe Sache in dem zweiten say. So the same thing on the other side. Das was krevim, I feel as ein apostle edis is canal. The reason the edim are apostle not allowed to testify, relatives, I feel when es nicht talking chash as evel mashakar sein, even though there is no chash. We're not afraid, we don't suspect that they're going to lie. Weil der Take von edis is nicht nur mit dem Birus sichli was madur sei. Why take is the fact that krevim apostle edis, and we're saying the apostle even if there's no chash that they lie. Like we said before, no chash in the case that we know it anyway. Or Nakshash Meshav, which we know for sure they're not going to lie. Nevertheless, Krevim are apostle. Why? Because I take it from Din Torah, because that's what the Torah says. The Torah says that there's a Din Eidus. So Eidus is a special Din, not only the logical reason behind it. Now, the same Torah, that Din that there is by Eidus, that Eidus accomplished something, was not given that take it, that strength, that was not given to Krevim, to relatives. So, therefore, there's no din. There's only a din Torah. Why they were given? That's what the Rebbe explains. So, just like the din, the Eidus itself is a din Torah, the fact that Krevim apostle is also a din Torah. The Balda, but Savil Kvei einem Chedesh is nicht muchra the take von Eidus. Is genug the Pirush al Picheshim. Now, when it comes to the Eidus Chedesh, be'emes, we don't need the concept of Eidus there. Other things we need Eidus. Not only al sabir to find out, but we need Eidus because Eidus, the Torah says, establishes it. Kiddush HaChedesh is something different. It's established anyway. The best proof is, now that we don't have the Eidus, now that we don't do the Eidus, we do it up to Cheshman. So it comes out that the Cheshman itself, Be'emes, could establish it. So we don't really need Eidus to establish it. By Eidus HaChedesh, Fodet sich l'das Reb Shimon plays the Birush al Eidus. So therefore, when it comes to Eidus HaChedesh, when we need the Eidus, it's not to establish it. It's established anyway. So why do we need? The Torah wants that if it's possible, we should have also a birur through Eidus. That the Eidus should tell us. But not that we really need the din Eidus here. But mainly, nafal mas nitokich shash v'shem yishaker. So since the only reason is because we need also Eidus to come, but not to establish a thing. So in the case where we're not afraid they're going to lie, like in our case that the two brothers are not negated, they have no personal interest in it to say that we can't trust them. So the Rebbe explained Pshat in the Rebbe Marash word. The Rebbe Marash said that you could, according to Reb Shimon, you could accept relatives as Eidus by Eidus HaChedesh because we know it anyway. And the question was, but there's a special din that the relatives are not enough. So the answer is, this din that the relatives are not good is when we need Eidus for to make the thing happen. And the Torah says that that thing was not given to relatives. In our case, the Eidus is a different type of Eidus. It's not to make the thing happen because we know it is. So here it's only for bitter. The Torah wants there should be an extra bitter. But if it's only for bitter, only for verifying, so when there is no chash that they're going to lie, because we verified anyway, so it's verified without them. So then what's the reason why Krevim wouldn't be allowed? So therefore Krevim are allowed. That's Reb Shimon. This beer that the Rebbe says will also answer another question according to Reb Shimon. The din is as geire meilem kurva fil shnei achim shnes geire mitim zelazed the gersh shnes geire kotn shnei ladome. Converts are not relatives. Two brothers that both converted, they're not considered apiyaloch relatives. And therefore, two brothers who converted can both together be Eidus. Testify. Why? Because Geshen is Gar when the person converts, he's like a newborn child. Each one was born separately and they're not considered brothers. So the Rebbe says, if so, is beimim to Mitzrayim as by Yitzias Mitzrayim Abidin got a din from Gerim. If we're going to say, in other words, it's questionable, but if we're going to say that by going out of Mitzrayim, the Yidden had a din of converts of Gerim, haben Yidden gehabt a din from Gerim, that a din of Gerim, in a move we don't understand. Was is the Reihe from them was say, so take Shere Bechem, Meishav Aaron. So what's the proof from the fact that Abisha said that Meishav Aaron could be Eides? What's the Reihe from there? That every time later on years also by Kiddush HaChedesh, two brothers could say, "Was haben got a din from Gerim? Meishav Aaron had a din of Gerim." So how is that a proof to Lachar Matan Torah Krevim? We want to prove that all years later, when 80 hundreds of years later, anytime two brothers will come and testify in the moon, we can accept them. Where do we see it? Because David said you could accept Meishav Aaron. Meishav Aaron weren't brothers. They were, if we hold that they were Gerim at that time. When did the Yidden become Gerim really? The Yidden became Gerim by Matan Torah. But really, it's not start Matan Torah. It started really by Yetzias Mitzrayim. So at this point, when David was speaking to Meishav Aaron, it was the beginning of Yetzias Mitzrayim, so it's connected already to Matan Torah, so they had the din of Gerim. So if they're Gerim, that's why they were allowed. The Shimon says that just like they were allowed even though they were brothers, so Saraya, that all Eides HaChedesh, two brothers are allowed. What's the Raya? Based on what we said before, it's understood. Those was Gerim Elam Kurve Meidim Zelas. That this is the fact that Gerim don't have, they're not called Kraven relatives, and therefore they could testify one for another. Is Mitzadevas Psul Kurve Zadim Gzeres HaKosev. The fact that you can't take relatives is because that's what the Torah says. It's Gzeres HaKosev. Unit Mitzadim Kirev Adas V'Sedosh V'Shn. Not because they're too close, and b'meila if they're too close, we don't know if they're saying the truth. So it's a din. It's not a logical thing. It's a din. And since it's a din, v'bal Gerim haben nicht kan din kurve sein, sie nicht bechlal psul. Since Gerim don't have kurve, it's a din of relatives. So it all depends on the din. Even though naturally they might still have the kiruv adas, the closeness, because they were originally brothers. They are brothers. But nevertheless, Iker is the union of the fact that Krevim apostle is a din. So it depends on what the din. And the din is that they're not Krevim. But that's only true by Eides, which is a din of Eides. And there's a din of Krevim apostle. So Gerim would be mutter. When we're talking about an Eides, but when we're talking about Eides HaChedesh, which is, as we said before, there's no din. Why is there no din of Eides? Because Eides is to establish something. And it's established through a cheshbon. So the Eides is only a bitter apiseichel. The chason from Krevim in them sug Eides. So when you say relatives are possible in this kind of Eides, it's at Mekirav Adas was it by Krevim. That's not because there's a din Krevim are possible. It's because of their closeness. We see physically that two brothers that both converted, but they have this closeness that we're afraid of, and therefore they should be puzzled. So they by Eides HaChedesh, they should be puzzled because of Kiruv Adas, not because of the din. So if it's not possible because of Kiruv Adas, and nevertheless the Torah said that Meishav Aaron are kosher. From them was so we can learn out from here too for later on, because if in this type of Eides, which is only mitzad because they're too close, and b'meila the birur that they're giving is not so acceptable, so Gerim wouldn't be accepted. Gerim and two regular brothers are the same. The problem is the same. By other things, it's not the same. By other things, which is a din, so it depends if they're brothers al pidin. If they're not brothers al pidin, then there's no problem. But by case of Eides HaChedesh, which is not mitzad adin, it's mitzad seichel, so Gerim brothers should be puzzled the same way like regular brothers. That's what the Shimon says. And since the Pasuk says that Meishav Aaron are mutter, either Gerim, that's a chiddush that they're mutter, because the fact that the Gerim wouldn't make a mutter here. The only reason it's mutter because the Torah said so. But we can learn out from here that the same thing is by later years that two brothers are kosher by Eides HaChedesh. The halacha bleibt over vidas rabbanon. The halacha is like the rabbanon as Krevim and apostle Eides HaChedesh. Krevim are apostle. That's not, we don't pass like Reb Shimon. The funny verstandig as by Kiddush HaChedesh that nom them din Eides. So the reason would be pepashtas. Reb Shimon holds that we don't need a din Eides. And that's because the din Eides is only when we don't know otherwise. Here, the din Eides doesn't apply. We don't need a din Eides. That's what Reb Shimon holds. So therefore, they're mutter even if they're relatives. Rabbanan argue, what is their svara? They say no, that there is a din of edus even by kiddush hachedesh, even though we know al picheshbon anyway. What's the svara? Yes, while Sparosim, we could explain the svara. From them gufa was Torah gesagt as a muzayin ederi kazer eva kaddish. Since the fact is that the Torah said that you do have to have edus in those cases where it's possible. So the Torah said that you have to have edim that saw. Like Rashi says in the Parsha on the Pasuk, the Eibishter took Moshe out and Mishanar and said, Kizurei v'Kadesh. When you see this Lavona, this is what you have to see, the Eidos have to see, and this is how they will make the Kiddush HaChedesh. So the Torah does say that. The Chure, on one hand you could ask, the Baldas Bezdem mus Saivi Wisrechanim dem Zmaf Meilet Alvonat V'Acheshbon, even though the Chure, since Bezdem has to calculate anyway, und noch mehr, not only they Stam have to calculate and know it. We do rely on them cheshbon. And not only nowadays when we don't have this bezin that could do it through the edus. I feel even though those days when they did it through edus, they did rely on the cheshbon. If they saw through the calculation that it wouldn't be seen, the Levana wouldn't be seen. We don't rely, so we rely on the cheshbon. So the cheshbon is a true thing. If I was there for so why do we need Eideriyah? So this is what the Rabban is saying. They have a shaila. Why do we need Eidos? We know it anyway. The phone gedrungen, so the Rabban say that's a raya. The Torah wants that you should have a cheshbon, and you know through a cheshbon, but the Torah wants there should be a din Eidos. When the Far lernen der Rabbanon, a Torah will zugeben, that's what the Rabbanon learned. The Torah wants to add that the Kvias from the Schedish shall sein nicht nur api cheshbon, was is bitter. It should not be only cheshbon, which is cheshbon just verifies when there's the beginning of the new moon. The Torah wanted that in addition should be a din edus. So the Shimon learns the opposite. The Shimon learns that by Kiddush HaChedesh there is no din edus. The edus is only a bitter. You can know api cheshbon. You could know b'cheshbon, so you know it. So then the Torah wanted extra bitter. Shavedis also, but it's not only a bitter; it's not a din. So the Rabbanan say, look at it differently. Why taka did the Torah want this extra bitter? Because the Torah wants a din edus. Why taka do we need it? Torah wants a din edus that in addition to the bitter that we rely on the cheshbon and we have the cheshbon, we could rely. Torah wants there should be a din edus. The Torah makes edus back into a din. So when there's a din edus, two brothers are not good, Kraven are good. When Shimon holds it's not a din edus, two brothers are good. But the Rabbanan holds it needs a din edus, therefore two brothers are not good. On the other hand, now comes out there's something else that's not understood. Since we're Mekadesh, we make the month based on this testimony about the Eidim saw. Which means that through two Eidim, that's when it happens. So why is the Shchedesh different? Was man verlost sich nicht auf die Eides of Kiddush Kiddush allein, and man macht a cheshbon? Why is it by Kiddush HaChedesh we don't rely on the Eides, but we also calculate? Und neben die Eides stimmen nicht mit dem cheshbon, is ein same Chanel Divrei. The Eides doesn't fit to the cheshbon, don't rely on them. So the Shaila is the other way. Before we said, since there's a cheshbon, why we didn't need Eides? So the answer is the Torah said we need Eides. Question is why take it? Why take it? They say this. No, why we say that? I'm sorry. Why they say this? We know, but why do we need the cheshbon? So why do we need if the cheshbon would work? But the Torah wants all say this. Now look at the other way. So now the Torah wants say this. Why do we need the cheshbon? That's the shaila. Shlema Rabbi so Rabbi explain it not in halach, not in nigla, but in pnimius. Jeder from the zwei Yonim made the in the cheshbon. Both of these two things, the fact that you have Eidim that saw it, which is seeing, and the calculation is do a mile shem b'ashen. Each one has something special over the other. Und kvias Rosh eigentlich an ihnen kolde, wie say the Torah mitzvah sitz kvias, the establishment of Rosh Chodesh is a very major inyan, fundamental inyan in Torah mitzvahs. We know that a lot, maybe even half of Torah mitzvahs depend on Kiddush HaChedesh. Pesach l'moshes, that's good to matzah and chometz and all the Yom Tov and Sukkot, everything depends on the Kiddush HaChedesh. When is the 15th day of Nisan? Depending on when the first day of Nisan is. Same thing with Tishrei, etc. And a lot of mitzvah, everything, a lot of it. So Kiddush HaChedesh is a very major mitzvah. So since it's a major mitzvah, I've opened beide miles. Has to have these. Since each of these two things have a mile, so the Torah wants both miles because such an important thing. The Father on the same that's why we rely on both together, the seeing and the cheshbon. This is the lashon of the Mefarish. There's a Pirush and the Rambam. We'll explain, and he says this lashon we need both. But the Rebbe is going to play out Pichsidus why we need both, because each one represents another inyan, and by Kiddush HaChedesh, which is such a major inyan, we need both. Wetten das verstehen, Hagma Maimer Yidu will explain this by it's known if in Posach Chedesh Tzelochem. There's a famous Rashi brings and the Yalkut, and he says like this: Rashi and Chumash and the Medrash asks, Torah should have started from Chedesh Tzelochem. That should be the first. That should be the beginning of the Torah. Rashi explains why that should have been the beginning. She mitzvah Yisrael. It's the first mitzvah that the Yidden were given. So Rashi refers to it as the first mitzvah. Why the Torah didn't start? There are answers, but the Kasha shows that Kiddush HaChedesh is the first mitzvah. The Chura Nitmuk is not understood. Why is Kiddush HaChedesh the first mitzvah that the Yidden were taka? Why is that taka the first mitzvah? You can't say that at the time when it was told they needed to know. That time they didn't have to know when Rosh Chodesh is. The Rebbe said in Torah 29, Pesach Mitzrayim lo yinegela das hakviz b'chadoshim. Didn't have to know when Rosh Chodesh is. All they had to know, Ki'im shebe'ed eser yomim yitchuseh. They told them like this: you start with Rosh Chodesh, and then he said from today is Rosh Chodesh, and 10 days from now you take the Korban Pesach. Abayed your dalet, and then 14 days from today, 10 days you take the Korban, 14 days from today, 4 days later you shecht it. So what made difference? Was it made difference the first day of Rosh Chodesh of the month or not? So it's not the Kiddush HaChedesh wasn't important for them, because if it would be, you could say that's why it's the first, because that was the first opportunity for a mitzvah. But that's not true. So why is Kiddush HaChedesh the first mitzvah? The Chura, the erste mitzvah, Nech Hashem Elokecha. First mitzvah should be and God your God, which is Kabbalah Sel Malchus Shamayim, the acceptance of the yoke of the kingdom of Hashem. Was it as Cholov? We saw it called from Kim Kol Mitzvahs. That's the foundation and the beginning of all mitzvahs. That should be the first. Is the beer bezet? The answer is Nech Hashem Elokecha is Ayescholos v'Yisod from all the mitzvahs negate and Kim and mitzvahs appeal. Nech Hashem the beginning and the foundation of all the mitzvahs concerning doing the mitzvahs. What does it mean? The mention of Mekayim the mitzvahs can boy a person. In order for a person to do the mitzvahs properly, must be in free as Kabbalah. First, they have to have the yoke of Hashem. So Nech is the beginning of keeping all the mitzvahs. Chedesh Hashem is very important, but not as the beginning, it's important as the end. The goal, the end means that's the goal. The goal of Torah mitzvahs is the Kiddush HaChedesh. Und der Vater ist das in Bayern gesagt worden, Bagdom, alle mitzvahs als mitzvah, and that's why it was the first, before all the mitzvahs, the first mitzvah, because that's the goal. And as we know that usually, that in the beginning, when you start something, you have to know the goal where you're trying to get to. So in the beginning, he told the goal. So David said this mitzvah Chedesh as the first, because that's the goal. How is it the goal? Why is a Chedesh said the goal of all the mitzvahs? Not just that it's a very important mitzvah, but it's the goal of all the mitzvahs. Because the kavanah von Torah mitzvahs is as it is on ufta nach Yiddish in the Bria. The purpose, the intentions of what David gave us Torah mitzvahs, so Yidden should accomplish a chidush, something new in the creation. Yidu abir apnim the maimer azal. Chazal, we know the deeper pshat, what the Chazal say, what the tzaddikim did is greater than the Shemayim waters. So Poshe pshat is that goes on the building of the Beis Hamikdash. That the building of the Beis Hamikdash has a milo over the creation of the world. The building with the Hamikdash through people, through tzaddikim, has more than the creation of the world. But there's a deeper pshat that while Maise Shemayim waters is Bria Yesh Me'ayin. When Hashem created the world, He made something from nothing. Aber Maise tzaddikim was Zaytunu the bitla yeshalayin. Tzaddikim means Yidden. They do the opposite. They're taking the yesh and change to dayin. They created the world. He changed ayin to yesh, nothing to something, and we have to change that something to nothing, make it bottle to Hashem. The Father is daily me'maiseh, and that's why that's greater, that's harder, that's a deeper thing. Why? Al derech ma'amer Chazal as godel nes achrei yisem ranishon. Like the Chazal say that whole story. That the Eibishter, the Tana was mispala, the Eibishter should give him, the Eibishter Milmaila gave him, and then he asked to take it back, and they took it back. And the Gemara says the second miracle that they took it back is greater than the first that the Eibishter gave. From Shemayim they give, they don't take. That means that the Nes V'umken Nazach Sa'ayim Mishkol, to take it back, Lamayla, means getting it back to the way it was before the creation, before Shemayim, is Grese for the Nes V'meyav Yov, is greater than giving as a Zolven Nazach Meyayim Yesh. Something should become, in other words, something that's not there and you make it. But something that has a shape already, and you're taking away that shape, taking away that Yeshes, that's something greater. So the Kavone is that the Eden should make from Welt, from Gashmias, make it into Ruchnis, to exchange it. That's a big Chiddush. Und das ist der Remes in Achidish Azelachem. That's a spiritual Chiddush hint in Achidish Azelachem. What does that mean? Chiddush in Loshen Chiddush. Chiddush means renew. Loshen Chodesh. Und der Keach von Chiddush ist übergegeben worden zu Eden. The Posei Achidish Azeh, this idea that you have to make a Chiddush, the Chiddush is to make every Gashmis into Ruchnis, is given over to you, to Eden. But durch Teire Mitzvahs machen sie die Welt für Al-Dira Baruch. For Teire Mitzvahs, you make the world for Al-Dira to Hashem. So that's the Chiddush, and that's the Teichen of the words Chiddush Azelachem in Ruchnius. The Mitzvah of Chiddush is the Keach of the Eden to change from Yesh to Ayin. The Mitzvah Nech Verstehen, the Medrash, and before the Rebbe gets out to answer what we said before, brings that this will explain the Medrash of Posek Tevim Mashnayim Menechot. Keshem is Parshas HaChidish. There's a medrash that says, based on the posuk where it says in Kehelas, two are better than one, and it goes through a whole list of two are better than one. So one of the things it says there is concerning this Parsha of Chidish Elohim. Zeh Lashon HaMedrash, just what the medrash says. Teva Parsha Shenemra Al Pishnayim, Parsha Shenemra B'Yochid. A Parsha that was said to two people is greater than a Parsha that was said from one, with one. It goes through a whole list of when two together is better than one. And here it says, what's the Parsha said by two? Bishnayim, shenemar yem Hashem al Moshe v'Aaron be'eretz Mitzrayim leimer Achidish Azelachem. In the parsha of Kiddush Achidish, it was given to two, and that's better than other things that were given to one. But it says that bringing down the Shechina in the Mishkan, when it was only Aaron, the Shechina didn't come. It was only when it was Moshe and Aaron. So we see two are better. But one of the examples it says of the Torah, things given to two, Moshe and Aaron, is this pasuk. It's not glad, it's not simple. So in the Frank parshas in Torah bevel Chamiras HaKadosh Baruch Hu ben al Moshe v'Aaron. There are many parshas in the Torah where Hashem spoke to Moshe and to Aaron. If I was bring der Medrash Dafke die parsha from Achidish, so why does the Medrash bring as an example that there is a parsha given to Moshe and Aaron Dafke concerning the union of Kiddush Achidish? But the beer and them the explanations like this. Achidish Moshe Chidish and Mavayim Matorah Klolis from Tekol HaTorah Mitzvah. Now, we said before that the whole idea of Chidish means Chidush, which is the purpose, the goal, the purpose of all the Torah mitzvahs. The Balda the Chidush from Torah mitzvahs is in Svein the Kudus Klolis. Since this idea of what Yidden are supposed to accomplish through Torah mitzvahs is a Chidush, but that Chidush is made up of two general points. And later the Rebbe will explain. But one of these 2 points is connected to Moshe and one connected to Aaron. Is in their parsha mutgeshes the shaychus to Beis. So this parsha, because this is something that has to do with Moshe and Aaron, the chiddush of the 2 points of chiddush, that's in the chiddush Azelachem. So that's why in the far zog der medrash of their parsha daf ketevim nashnayim enechad. That's when the medrash wants to show the mile of the two. Says it in this parsha, quoting the pasuk of Kiddush HaChedesh, because Kiddush HaChedesh is something that represents the need for both of them. And but other parshas, we don't see that. So this parsha is. How is it? How is it shaychus to both? What's the connection that Kiddush HaChedesh is shaychus to both? There are 2 points here. So that explains what the 2 points are, and then he'll explain how it's shaychus to Moshe and Aaron. But Shengeret Kama Pomin, in the Pirish HaLoshen, Dira Leis Bora B'Tachtenim, Rebbe, I said many times, when we say the Loshen, that Eibishter wants a Dira B'Tachtenim, as das Kela Tzvei Nekutis Klolis. The Dira B'Tachtenim is the Eibishter have a dwelling place in low world. It contains 2 general points. Number 1, Mitzad Tachtenim, from the downside, from down here. Our job is to make a Dira B'Tachtenim. So one thing is to make the world a place which is fit for Hashem to come down. So we have to elevate the world to make it fit for a Dira for Eibishter. And then Mitzad L'mayla, who makes the Dira? The Eibishter makes it. Mitzad L'mayla, Mitzad above, Dira Leis Baruch, it's a Dira to him. A Dira to who? to the Eibishter. Now, we always learn in Chassidus and Kabbalah that there are many madrekas and many elamis. But when we say Dira Le is Baruch meant, as Atzmusa is Baruch steht begidlu de lamata. The essence of the Eibishter with its whole essence is here. The Anodam Lahavdil Gefinzer with the Rasa B'chal Atzmusa. Since we're using the term Dira, dwelling place, in the dwelling place, a person is there. That's his whole mitzvah is there. Not like a coat that your hand is in and not the house that the Dira that you have is the whole thing. So same thing when we say the world is becoming, should become, and our job is to make it become a Dira for the Eibishter. So we have the fact that we have to work, the world should be a place fit for it. But then what we have to do is bring down the etzem of the Eibishter into the world. Okay. And both of these parts is a chiddush. Why? Number one, we said before, what is the chiddush in making from the Welt to Ayin, which is the opposite of what the Eibishter did? That's a chiddush. So that's the first chiddush. And that's connected to the first inyan. First inyan is that you have to make the world fit. That means you have to do something with the world, which is a yesh, and do things with mitzvahs with it and the ruchnis of it, and it changes the time. And then you have the second thing, hamshochas atzmas lamate, is an inshal chiddush. The second thing is also a chiddush. The fact that atzmas comes down here is a chiddush. From these habas me'ayin liyesh is blaze from ha'ora. The fact that David created the world, so we know that's only from ha'ora. We learn in Chassidus always there's the etzem of David, and then there is the hisgalus, the giluyim of David. That's called the ha'ora, like a shine from the sun. So the creation came from ha'ora, as it says, bidvar Hashem shemayim nasu. The world, the earth, the shemayim was created, which means the universe, through Hashem's dibur. And Hashem's dibur represents only ha'ora of Hashem. That's not the essence of Hashem. Und dafke dort arbeite von Bittel Yesh L'Ayin v'Ktuv Gitan Achidush. Dam Shochas Atzmas L'Mata. By us working to change over the Yesh, the Welt, to Ayin, to Ruchnius, that brings up Shochas Atzmas. So both sides, the fact that the down has to be elevated to the top, ready to be close to the Eibishter. And then that way, Mamshe from the Eibishter down here, Be'etzem, they're both included in Achidush Azelachem. They're both Achidush. Und das ist ihre Tar, was der Medrash sagt of their parsha Dafka Teit Mishnayim Menechot. That's what Dafka, but in this parsha of Kiddush HaChedesh, where it says Meish and Aaron, the Torah says here we see, the Medrash says here we see how it's important to have them both. But in their parsha was Gitzich Haruiz, the Tachlis from ganz Torah Mitzvah, this parsha, Kiddush HaChedesh, which, as we said before, that shows the Tachlis of Torah Mitzvah, which is the word Chidush, seine Mutgish Beit in the Kudus, and then we see both of these points. The point of from down to up, that we have to elevate the world, and that causes the coming down from Hashem, of Etzem of Hashem. Sai Meishe, we need both. Sai Meishe, what's Meishe? Shushvina de Malka. It says in Zayar that just like by a chasana, you have to have two unterfiri, we call them, two escorts. One from the chosin side, one from the kala side. So the same thing with the connection, Yidin Adebishter, Meishe is called the escort from the Eibishter side, Aaron is called the escort from the Yidin side. So what does that mean? Meishe is the escort of the king, was tutu from shochas alakus mamayla lamata. It's bringing down the Eibishter down here. That's him. Gidem keich adem chidish and shochas atzmas lamata. Meishe gives the ability for Yidden that we should bring down the Eibishter down here. He's the escort, so to speak. Brings down the shochas atzmas down here. Sayaren, we need also Aaron. Sheshvina the maternisa. He's considered the escort of the queen, which is halom matalmaya. The isha, the keva, the female is always the makabel. Represents the down here, so he's the escort from the downside, down place. Aaron is the escort that makes that down here, the world should be akela to accept. So Meishe and Aaron represent the two levels of the Chidush, and that's why their being together is important to this parsha of HaChedesh Azalachem to represent the Chidush. And there it continues. Just like we said before, Kiddush HaChedesh, gives out the goal, the purpose of Torah mitzvahs concerning Welt, that the Welt should be elevated and the Welt should be able to take the atzmas of the Eibishter. Azegit Esaru is the pool of Torah mitzvahs in Yidden. It also gives out the effect that has on Yidden. Then by Yidden we have the same two in Yonim. What shot? Yidden werden zugeglichen to the Levana. Yidden are compared to the Levana. The Levana is, the moon is called Moira Cotton, the small luminary. Meshakosov, where do we see that Yidden are compared to the Levana? It says, Mi Yokum Yaakov ki Cotton. Yaakov is called Cotton. So, Yidden are called Cotton. It says, Yidden, so we say Yaakov is called Cotton, and similar to the Levana, which is called Cotton. When we say the Levana gets renewed and grows, gets bigger and bigger, shows if the Mechidish V'Aliyah for Niden durch Teire Mitzvahs Mekatos Lagat. Shows when the Yidden growing. How do Yidden grow? Teire Mitzvahs. So it shows the fact that the Yidden grow through Teire Mitzvahs. So the union of Levone, the growth of the Levone represents the Aveda of Yidden. The Aliyah for Niden teilen sich in zwei Sugim. And just like we said before in Vel, there's two ideas. We have two categories, two types of things by Yidden growing. One is the Avedim Zadekeches Pnim Shalod, and one is the Avedim Na'id, that whatever he has, his attributes, which is him. You work to get closer to Hashem inside we call it Keches Pnim, in your inner attributes. Was Bechlal is those, the Aveda Shal Pitam Vadas. That's when you serve Hashem with your Seichel. The Maile from the Aveda is the Inyan of Pnimis. It's Pnimis, it's you, and you understand. And when you understand something and you love something, you have a feeling to it. That's a higher way that you get closer to the Eibishter. It's in Nem Dur the Metzias Adam, and that it penetrates into the whole being of the person. Sein Seichel Midas v'chul adin and Meibish. His Seichel and his Midas serve Hashem. So that's one thing that he does. Now that is similar to the thing that, like I said before, in the world has to become prepared to be able to be a receptacle to Eibishter coming down, but you have to work with the world. Same thing here. The person has to work with himself. What does himself mean? All his parts. He has to work with the Seichel and his Midas, all the details a person has. That's parallel to the other thing where we say the Welt has to be, as a Welt, changed and elevated to be close to be a Kela to the Makabal, the Etzem of the Eibishter. Then by Yid, you have the second thing. The Avedim is Harakeches, Makim Mishal on Neshama, and Tzadatzim on Neshama. Then he serves the Eibishter from Keches, which is not really him, it's beyond him, it's within him. I'm not going to go into the explanation of what they are, but there's certain kech. But the main one he says there, etzem anashama, you have to serve the Eibishter from your etzem. Was drik sich in the bittel zum rotzen alien, which is a yid has the nullification to the Eibishter's will, l'mayla matam das beyond seichel. So that's similar to the second Aveda. The second Aveda in Welt we said is that the etzem comes down. You make a kale and then the etzem comes down. A yid has to serve Hashem also with himself and also connect his etzem, which is not his keches. It's just that he contains within him l'mayla matam das, the Kabbalah sale. Und das ist der Tam Hapnimi, was Chedesh wird nicht durch beide Unionen zusammen. Now we understand why you need both things by Kiddush HaChedesh. Kiddush HaChedesh represents the Aveda of Yidden. And we said now Aveda of Yidden need both things. Sai Ederi and Sai Cheshbon. You need Eides who saw, and then you need the Cheshbon. What is the Pshat? The Chibur from beide Miles, we have both Miles. And the already says, in Aveda Mitzadriya, when you say Eides means they came and they saw it. That's milmayla lamata. That's not something that they figured out. That's something they just whatever they saw, what's there. So that's the aveda that comes from above. But then you have the cheshbon. The cheshbon is that you have to calculate with your mind. That's you. So here we have the two inyanim in aveda v'yid in the chidush. Teire mitzvahs is the inyan of chidush because you're making the yesh into an ayin. And here we have two inyanim. Just like in Welt, we had the two inyanim. You have to work with the Welt, and then you have to be mamshech atzmus. This will the Torah will mamshich atzma. The same thing here. You have to work with who yourself are and elevate yourself with all the details of yourself. And then you have the etzem of the Eden. So here the Rebbe says like this more. On one hand you have the Riyah, like we said, you see, which is not understanding. It's not really you that you get it. Also, the Eidus was given I take a stem. Also, that when you have the Riyah, you have Eidus, you have to have Eidus. And what's Eidus we said before? According to the halacha of the Chachamim, that the Eidus by Kiddush HaChedesh is also a din. It's a Gzeres HaKosov. Gzeres HaKosov is a day. That's what the Torah said. Is the Eibishter coming down? It's Eidus are down here, but it shows the inyan that we take the Eibishter down. We bring the Eibishter comes down. That's in Eidus. On the other hand, as is door on the Shtimp in the Cheshbon, we still have the Cheshbon, and the Eidus have to fit to the Cheshbon. And what's Cheshbon? Cheshbon is calculation. Shal pitam vadas. That's Seichel. So what happens is that you have the combination of both. So the question was, why do we need both? Because in Ruchnis we need both. When it comes to the Chiddush, we need the Aveda of Panimis of Yidin, which is the Aveda, which is similar to Cheshbon. You have to work and calculate. And then there's the Aveda of Riyah, seeing, or a giving of Eidus, which is also a Din Teira, which is coming from the Eibishter. And the point is, we have to put them both together, which means that Bittel Shel Ma'ila Mitam Vadas, that Nimshich and Apnimis, that Bittel Ma'ila Mitam Vadas comes into you. You have Aveda of yourself, but then that bittul connects to it. It's not two separate inyan. You have the Aveda with the Seichel and the Midas, and then you also have the inyan of Kabbalah Sale. the seichel and the midas comes Kabbalah Sefer, which another Sikha that explains what that means, that your seichel works because you have Kabbalah Sefer, but that's different other places, but that's in the Kudim we have here. So we understand Al Penigla, what is the Machlekes of Shimon and the Chachamim, and we understand why we need, according to the Chachamim, why we need both. And we said that they hold that you need cheshbon, but at the same time you need a din. You need both. Why do we need both? Because they represent two derech and aveda, which is hinted in what chedesh azalachem is, and there you need both, and that's why it's Meisha v'Aaron, because Meisha represents the union of coming down, and Aaron the union of elevating from down here, and that makes it all fit together.